a huge job for all of us.
Okay, so we've started recording the meeting, and I think we'll go ahead and get underway. I'm John Coonrod. I'm the co-founder and global coordinator of the Movement for Community-Led Development, and I really appreciate you all joining today. I'm going to throw up the slides. So today the focus of our meeting is going to be really a follow-up of the independent dialogue we had. Translate the independent dialogue on transforming food systems that we held last week into some actionable steps by our national chapters and globally. Some of you, this is your first global call. I'll give a short introduction to the movement and what we're here for. I think if everybody else could mute when you're not talking, that would be great. We'll then do a recap of what's been happening this month, and then we'll really focus on the Food Systems Summit, and we'll have a short recap of what came out of the dialogue, share reflections, and then really share some action items from our chapters around the world. Then we'll look at some coming up events in the rest of this year, and including the announcements for our next calls. The movement was launched along with the Sustainable Development Goals. The actual day that the Sustainable Development Goals, the 2030 ambitious agenda that the world adopted on September 25th of 2015, many of us had been really lobbying hard to ensure that there was some mention of communities, of bottom-up processes in the summit. And there was some, but on the day it was announced, the Pope actually was a guest speaker, and he said, this is all well and good that you set these goals and targets, but the real question is, what will it mean to real human beings struggling to overcome their own poverty? And the movement is really about that. What needs to change so that the human rights of this young woman, actually a girl, 15 years old with her baby on her back, scratching out a living, can effectively exert her voice and in a responsive system of governance, in a comprehensive set of public services to which she has a fundamental and equal right with every other human being. So we launched this with 5 goals. The first being ensuring voice and agency for women, youth, and marginalized groups. A shift in resources to ensure that a fair share of public budgets is in the hands of local communities, which we're trying to set a norm is at least 20%. Good local governance, meaning democratic processes and transparency and effectiveness and citizen engagement directly in the processes of local governance. When those things come together, communities generally can achieve quality public services, which is really at the heart of the Sustainable Development Goals. And we want to be sure that communities have the resources and information that they need to plan their own resilience. Because as we've learned in COVID, it's community leaders who are the first responders. And unless you have resilience at the community level, there's no chance of it at any other level. The front lines of this movement are in our national chapters, and we have lots of people on the call today in those green countries that you see there where there are organized national chapters, and in the orange countries where people are participating and exploring and looking at would there be value to organize the movement for community-led development in their country. Plus, we have 72 international NGOs that are members. And one of our real asks of the international NGOs is the support of these international, of the national movements, plus advocacy and evidence This is our theory of change. It has two big thrusts, forming advocacy partnerships to pressurize national governments to decentralize and devolve resources, and also to form partnerships to facilitate the process of community-led development. And hopefully those will form a convergence, because only when that happens do we believe you can really achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. We have four working groups. We have a communication working group, a evidence and research working groups and subgroups, a COVID-19 working group, and a working group that's beginning to emerge called the Triple Nexus, that looks at the combination of humanitarian response, peace building, and development, and particularly how that has to come together with community leadership. So with that, I'd like to turn to Gunjan to share some of the recent achievements in May. Gunjan, you want to talk about what's going on?
Yeah, May has been a really busy month for us. So as some of you know, in January this year, we had launched our collaborative research. We had launched a report that we had done on 173 programs, community-led development programs across 65 countries, and we had released 2 tools. And over the last few months, we've seen more and more organizations trying to adopt these tools. But you saw from our list of global members, INGO members, that we have huge organizations there. And not everybody in the organizations knows about the movement, about the work we do, how they can be a part of it, and what tools are available. So global communities and PCI organized, in fact, yesterday, the Brown Bag event to actually help their members and their staff across different countries. So we had people from Zambia, India, all over the world who are part of the Global Communities PCI family, over 60 people who turned up for our Brown Bag event, where we introduced them to the research, to the movement, and to the 2 tools. So that's a great example if others want to follow. We know that some other organizations are planning this, but if you would like to do something similar in your organization, please get in touch. We would love to do that.
And just to say, a Brown Bag event comes from the idea that people would bring their lunch to the event in a brown bag. So these are lunchtime events.
Yes. Thank you, John. And if you go to the next slide, John. And so we've been, since we launched the tools in January, we've been hearing from a lot of people that the introductory sessions that we do on the tool, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, just showing them the tool is not enough. People wanted to roll them out because these tools are now available, and they wanted to see how to do that quickly. And we heard from a lot of, bilaterals and donors and funders that they have been interested in the tool, and, they would like to adopt them. And so we designed a training of trainers as well as a full 3-hour training on the CLD assessment tool. This is a tool that organizations can use to see how community-led their programming is and where to make course corrections. And if you've attended some of our earlier calls, you've heard of our partners who've actually used these tools. You've heard them talk about how it made a difference in their work. So we now have a full 3-hour training on CLD assessment tool, including a simulation that people go through. We held our first training. The Malawi chapter, actually, of the movement hosted the first training yesterday. It had over 30 people in there, including people from USAID and their grantees who were there and participated in the training. We also have trainings coming up in Benin, for Benin and West Africa in June. The dates are to be announced, but if your colleague from West Africa or Benin would like to participate in the training, please get in touch with us. It will be in English and French. The Spanish version of the tool is ready and should be launched anytime now, and then we will have a Spanish training on the tool. And then one of our partners, Outreach International, is hosting a 3-day intensive training. This is not 3 hours, this is a 3-day training on actually using the tool in Zambia. from the 2nd of June to the 4th of June. So anyone from Zambia who would like to participate in that, again, get in touch. And finally, we have a training of trainers. It's a 2-part training. So it's going to be 2 sessions of 3 hours each, which is available so that if people want to then, learn how to use the tool and then train others in their organizations, in their networks to use the tool, you can do that. And these are certificate training. So the movement is actually issuing certificates for people who complete the training. And John, you're going to talk about the independent dialogue in education.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
on that one. But yes, so May has been very happening. And we expect this to continue in June when we are presenting at a number of places. But we'll talk about that later.
Very good. Thanks so much, Gunjan, and congratulations to everybody who's brought this assessment tool into reality. It is having a bigger impact than I think I ever imagined it would. So we had a dialogue, and I'm going to go through, it was on the 19th, so just 1 week ago. And we had top people involved who were involved with the summit as keynote speakers, and we had breakout groups. And this was an official dialogue that was registered with the UN, that's submitting its findings to the UN. So it's part of the entire process on the Global Food Systems Summit. Dr. Jemima Njuki is the director for Africa for IFPRI, one of our member organizations, and she is also a key advisor on the summit. She gave an overview. If you missed it, please watch the video that's on our website. The keynotes were short, concise, and very, very effective. She gave us an overview of the whole system, and then she really focused on the importance of gender. She herself has done a lot of research on gender. She's emphasized that in all of our strategies, we must prioritize women's voice and leadership in food systems. We must come up with interventions that are gender transformative of the systems and institutions, because presently women face enormous barriers to full and equal participation, despite the fact that women are doing most of the work in the food system. And then address the structural inequalities, the legal, the social inequalities that are holding women back from fully leading and earning their incomes from the food system. Our second keynote speaker was Dr. Mirna Cunningham Kane. She's also an official advisor in the Food Systems Summit. And she is a Mosquito Indian from Nicaragua. She is has been a real leader in the indigenous rights movement. And that's a big part of the Food Systems Summit. She identified several priorities that really have to be addressed, ensuring that indigenous peoples are able to protect their land and their systems from assault from the colonial culture. She also called upon scientists to stop being so patriarchal, to actually organize dialogue, paired dialogues among equals, scientists and local knowledge holders. That food systems take a more holistic landscape approach, and that local indigenous communities actually are supported in holding exchanges. I know in the Hunger Project, we've seen the enormous power that when you have community leaders from one place visit community leaders from another, it really sparks enormous innovation and knowledge sharing. Support for the commercialization of indigenous products. Everybody on Earth still requires cash income, and so being able to bring the value of indigenous products to the larger economy is good for everybody. And improving access to information about indigenous rights, about indigenous products, as well as about seed systems, nutritional foods that have been adapted over thousands of years to be successful. Dr. Madura Swaminathan, who's chair of the MS Swaminathan Research Foundation. For those of you who may know, back in the 60s, it was her father, Dr. MS Swaminathan, who was the father of the Green Revolution in India and the first winner of the World Food Prize. Her institute and her work has really focused on how to improve the incomes of smallholder farmers, small-scale farmers. They have looked at innovations to reduce input costs, which is a big barrier to improving small farmer incomes, increasing public investment in small farmers, finding new technology that is really relevant and how to propagate it among small-scale farmers. And then a big focus on the collective economic power. Small farmers are often isolated. They are not part of associations that can give them collective economic power. And so promoting the formation of whatever kind of group works for farmers to enhance their incomes and enhance our economic power. So, and then we broke into dialogues on the 5 action tracks of the food systems dialogue, which you see here. Ensuring access to safe and nutritious food for all. That's the very definition of food security. Shift to sustainable consumption patterns. Boosting nature positive production. By that we mean production that actually improves the natural environment rather than depletes it. Advance for equitable livelihoods and building resilience to vulnerability, shocks, and stress. So, and there's a nice write-up as well as recordings on the website. But at the moment, I'm going to stop sharing my slides and start having a real discussion. So I think there really should be 2 parts of the discussion, and anyone can participate. You can either raise your hand and I'll call on you, or you can just unmute and shout. But the first part of this discussion, I would love to hear from people who were part of the dialogue and who have additional reflections for what their takeaways were as they participated in the independent dialogue that we held. So the floor is open to anyone who'd like to contribute. And if you don't, I will call on you.
I'm happy to.
Please, go ahead.
Something. One thing that came out in our discussion during that event is that a lot of times historically, the people involved in agriculture projects are agriculture experts. And a lot of the things that you just mentioned have nothing to do with agriculture, but they have a big impact on what happens ultimately. Gender, access to land, lack of information, lack of public services like agriculture extension, climate change, nutrition, culture, local cultures, and also the idea that we saw during COVID about the fragility of food supply systems that are based too much on international systems, as well as the fact that they crowd out the local farmers. So from the perspective of community-led development, which is why I love community-led development, it seems to me that as we broaden our horizons to have a more comprehensive picture of what it's going to take to move this all forward, a lot of it is going to be about facilitation and vision and local action, and not just expertise regarding agriculture, which I'm preaching to the choir here, but I think it's incumbent upon us to advocate for project and program design that takes all of that into consideration in a way that it doesn't usually be.
Great, Ann, thank you. Other people who participated in the dialogue, anything that you took away from it? Rollins was our master of ceremonies. Rollins, what did you take away from the dialogue?
Thank you very much, John. Yes, I was a master of ceremony, and that was a great conversation to participate in. The keynote speech from the director from IFPRI, the African director from IFPRI, really highlighted key issues on the face, or what we can call feminization of agriculture, and what that is calling us, what type of action that feminization is calling us unto. So the connection between the role women or female leaders are playing in agriculture, and at the same time in the food system, and how also we are not bypassing them. So I like the way she really presented it, because she did not concentrate on the top level, like food system, but trying to really bring it down on the level of the woman that you showed, John, and trying to emphasize to us that the system has to work. Whatsoever value chains are being put in place, they have to work for this particular female farmer, female leader at the local level. I think that really brought out a powerful issue of feminization of agriculture and the call to action that we all have to do as we are talking about this issue of food systems.
Very good. Thanks, Rollins. Who else who was part of the independent dialogue? Any other reflections or takeaways?
Yeah, I thought, especially the three keynote speakers, together kind of looking at everything that they said was really interesting, because I think together you can see a lot of kind of the tensions between in our current systems, and the need to include Indigenous and local knowledge, and trying to figure out how we marry the best of kind of both worlds, the science and local knowledge, to make kind of these really strong community-led systems.
Great, thanks, Leah. Who else? Anyone else? Gunjan, what did you take away from it?
So I think in two things from the main session and the discussions, I think one of the things that came out for me was this balance between technology and Indigenous systems, and how the two can actually work together instead of being in constant tension. I thought that was, that to me was important. In our breakout group, we talked a lot about, so we were breakout group 5. So we were talking about resilient systems, resilient food systems. And so we talked about work needed at 2 levels, at the level of, of the local food systems itself, the work that needs to happen in communities and in strengthening the work that's happening there, but also the policy level work, which is kind of required, and the changes that are required to support local food systems. There was a lot of talk of how the pandemic had, so our session was all about the pandemic and how it had impacted so much of the work that is happening and that was being done, and how it impacted local food systems. And yet it was the local food systems that were able to sustain, withstand the impact of the pandemic. It wasn't the global food systems, and essentially areas that were heavily dependent on getting food from outside were the ones where there was a huge problem in this time. So.
Yep, really good point. Anyone else who was in the dialogue want to share a takeaway that they had from it?
And just to add on your point, Kunjan, when that speaks to the statement that Simon really powerfully presented, I think one of his lines, which I heard him say, was that community leaders stepped forward. They took a leadership space during the pandemic, and they are not going to be pushed backwards. And I think that was a powerful statement, and it also touches on each one of us. When we keep quiet, when we see some forces rising up again in a build back, but building badly, pushing back those that took over their space and pushing them backwards. It's time to speak out and not just watch that. Otherwise, we'll build back the same thing. So, yeah, you're right, Gunjan. They maintained the space. They kept life going. They kept the food systems going. And if the whole conversation of food systems is going to push them back into an invisible space, God will judge us.
Yes.
Absolutely. And just for people who were not on that call, Simon was a young representative from Zambia, from the Zambia chapter of the movement, a youth representative who shared with us, with the group and the dialogue, what the movement is and his vision of the movement.
Okay. Well, please, if something pops up that hasn't been voiced here, otherwise we'll start looking at what we're going to do with all this. Let me mention one other thing, and that is that part of the sort of the pre-dialogue strategy is that you'll see when you go to the website and click on our big featured story, we have all of these blog posts written by a bunch of important people, CEOs of different organizations, leaders from World Vision and other big organizations. And they joined us in promoting these on social media. On Monday the 17th, when we sent out a newsletter announcing these stories, these thought pieces by all the different head leaders from different member organizations. That was our biggest day on our website yet. We had more visitors on that day, Monday the 17th, than we've ever had before on the MCLD.org website. So one action step that we can do as we head in towards the big international summit, that's tweeting about these, sharing these. You know, when you're on our website, over at the left, there are these three little things that allow you to share a specific page on your Facebook page or your Twitter feed or your LinkedIn page. And that can help push these ideas of community-led food systems and the importance of that into the dialogue. Our own intern, who's our czar for the movement, social media isn't here today. He's away with his family, but we can target people. Like we can send, @ the FAO and the UN system and other organizations that really should be paying attention to these voices. So that's the communication aspect, the using social media and emails and Facebook and other things to promote this perspective, because this isn't the only perspective. There's a big perspective around the Food Systems Summit for globalization, for top-down food systems. And those are voices that have a lot of money behind them. So finding ways to bring the voice for community-led food systems louder and louder in the summit is going to be one of the things that everybody, all of us and everybody we know can contribute to.
John, do you want to talk about the Advocacy Toolkit?
Oh, right. Why don't you talk about the, or somebody should talk about the Advocacy Toolkit.
Maybe Sarah should.
Sarah, talk about the Advocacy Toolkit.
Sure. So as the Movement for Community-Led Development, we've been compiling kind of the biggest takeaways from our research on community-led food systems and the biggest points that we think other organizations, our members, and the UN need to be targeting. So we've come up with a draft toolkit to increase awareness about the key issues behind the summit that we want the summit to address and our recommendations. And right now, as I mentioned, it's a draft. We're going to come back to it after today's call and add in some of your thoughts and the thoughts that emerged from our Wednesday dialogue and circulate that widely. And hopefully that will be helpful for anybody who wants to be tweeting or any socialization around these thoughts.
Great.
Just to add to that, we have a lot of events, independent dialogues like the one we hosted, as well as side events that are being hosted in the run-up to the summit and the pre-summit that is happening. So we are hoping that these toolkits will be helpful to carry the community-led food systems perspective to these different fora, so that they can all from different points and feed into the dialogue and keep reiterating the importance of community-led food systems from different platforms. But also, as you look at the advocacy toolkit, if there are other ideas you have, if there are resources that you have that you would like to share, please do get in touch with us.
Hillary, I think you had your hand up, but I don't see it now. Did you want to add something?
Just very briefly. So, Elizabeth and I are both passionate about implementing the International Code of Marketing here in North America. And, with the talk about community-led food systems, we, back in the old days in the Hunger Project, we were always very clear the hunger wasn't over there. And when we feed human milk to human babies, we produce the kind of emotionally healthy human beings that don't need to consume, that can be citizens. It's to me, it's integral to the whole worldwide project that we include transforming food for infants in North America as part of this whole process.
Yep, optimal breastfeeding is such a key part of nutrition. And I believe it's the first week of August is the big advocacy moment around the World Association for Breastfeeding. There's a World Breastfeeding Week to promote this, and I think that's something that in our countries and in our chapters we can all participate around, because there'll be a number of I know that the WABA, the kind of association around this, and others have their own food systems strategy to be sure that this important, first 18 months of people's nutrition is emphasized, because the whole future of one's health and intellectual development depends on it. Other ideas, recommendations, thoughts about either advancing this agenda in your own national dialogues, in your own community dialogues, in the movement in your country, or globally that we could all do together? Thoughts or recommendations? Yes, Elizabeth?
Yeah, as the International Baby Food Action Network, we're very engaged in, of course, the whole area of food security and appropriate nutrition, et cetera. And one of the areas that we constantly run into, especially with the large, summits and the Nutrition for Growth and all these various movements, is the fact that they need to be free from conflict of interest. And we see this creeping of the global food corporations like Nestle and Danone and various other large food conglomerates, gradually creeping into, as partners, because they donate money, et cetera, into these particular agendas and these initiatives, and tend to take over, the agendas and twist them into a direction that will benefit, of course, the corporate sector. So this is an area that, we've found, of course, in the whole area of breastfeeding and optimal infant and young child feeding, the increasing corporatization of infant feeding has been, of course, this huge global problem with hundreds of thousands of deaths, et cetera. So this is an area that we're very strong about, that we make sure that conflicts of interest don't creep into the areas that we're working in.
Very good. I know it was the World Health Assembly is going on right now, and I know that it was also this issue was on the agenda there this week.
Right.
Steve.
Yes, John. Hello, everyone. My name is Steve from Kenya. And I see a lot of work has been going on by the movement. Now, I just wanted to ask a question here regarding today's topic. Have we thought about some activities that the movement can champion at the grassroots level, other than the kind of the stakeholder meetings that we have that can help deepen or make the food systems work for that poor farmer, that poor household or low income household at the grassroots level?
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Ann.
Into that. Steve, thank you so much for bringing that up, because I'm not sure if Jude, you want to talk about it, but our Liberia chapter is working on set of well, I guess, it's not just an activity, because it's a idea of piloting a sustainable farmers group of 50 farmers at the start, in a place where there is no agricultural extension support, and there's not a lot of access to information or shared local knowledge, and also shared experimentation. So Jude, I don't know if you want to say more about that, or and then, because I would love to get people's input. We're all in the process of helping Jude in the chapter right now design this small starting activity. So turn it over to you, Jude.
Jude, you're not muted, but we don't hear you. I don't know if your mic volume was down or if something is unplugged. Oh, sorry that we're not hearing you. I'm still jealous about your background, though. This looks great.
I know, it's so nice.
You can get your sound working, that'd be super. Okay, well, that is, I think what Ann was speaking to and what Jude is doing is a key part, as you saw in our theory of change, partnerships for really directly facilitating community-led development, getting people organized to tackle the challenges they face. I know that in Zambia, our first kind of, the movement's first consortium is breaking ground on an epicenter in Zambia at the beginning of June. I know Samuel was trying to get on. I don't know if he is on. But that's kind of a big milestone moment. And one of the things in the epicenter strategy is that one of the first committees that gets set up is a equal number of women and men for working together on food security. So, which is, let's see, Jude just looks like reconnected. Huh. No, having trouble in Liberia connecting. So Rollins, do you want to talk about how the epicenters do their food security committees? Because I think it exactly addresses what Jude is working on and what Ann was talking about.
Thank you, John. First, let me say this is really a great question, and the purpose of having national chapters on the ground, one of the reasons is to make sure that we develop country-specific communities of practice, where within, like as Kenya chapter or Malawi chapter or Zambia chapter or Uganda chapter, as a group there, we develop a conversation and a language around community-led food systems. What does it mean to us as Malawi? What does it mean to us as Zambia? What does it mean to us as Uganda? And how we use that to drive specific activities within our own organization. So it's also a platform for peer-to-peer learning and then further to us to drive a conversation within our own countries. Which platforms should we start talking to so that we bring this conversation because I think most of the countries in Africa are having conversations around food systems right now, finding ways of inputting into the global summit. So it is also the role of these national chapters that we have to be able to get into those conversations in our countries and promote the agenda of community-led systems. Besides that, specifically on the example of Zambia that you mentioned, John, this is where different stakeholders or institutions, NGOs have come together and developed a community-led program which is being implemented without any branding of NGO name, like, okay, this is Hunger Project and it's our hat here, but it's branded community-led program. So it's actually branded the main theme that drives the change itself, because what makes whatever we do on the ground work, it's because of that community-led approach. So this project actually is the first one where a consortium of NGOs have come together, but they have chosen to take off their hats, their identity of their hats identities, and name that project community-led development project. And so there are those pilots happening, and the question now, as you're putting it's really great, how can we scale that? For example, in Kenya, example in Malawi, in other countries, how do we come up with a program like the one, a consortium program of community-led, like the one we're having in Zambia, where the implementation is really not the branding of our name, but the branding of what makes it work. In such a way, we can be able to drive advocacy in an easier way than when we branded the names of our institution, and then when you try to use it to drive advocacy, you really have to peel the onion and say, okay, it's not the Hunger Project that I'm talking about. It's not what made it work. It's not really the Hunger Project. What made it work is the CLD approach. That's what made it work. So when people are coming to visit that program in Zambia, they actually say, we are going to visit a CLD program in Eastern region in Chipata. You see that. So already there you have started driving the language of CLD to say, so what's that community-led development approach that you are doing? So yes, that's a powerful question. It should be each one of the national chapters we're involved in to develop those particular processes. And they will show up differently in different national chapters. It will show up differently in Zambia. It will show up differently in Malawi. It will show up differently in Uganda. It will show up differently in Kenya and all that. So that's a great question. And I don't know if you had some other ideas on how else it can show up in Kenya. I think that would be really great to have a conversation around that within the Kenya chapter when we are talking about it, or also in touch with, I think, Dr. Daisy. I'm sure she's on the call, and so she can actually pull this thread.
Yeah, and Daisy is on the call. I'd love to hear from you, Daisy, because I know Daisy's been interacting with the national food system dialogue, you know, the Ag Ministry process that's going into this summit. Daisy, do you want to comment?
Yes, hello everyone.
Hi, Daisy. There you are. Yay.
Hi. Yes, we've been interacting with the some of the players, or the players within who are participating in preparations for the summit. The organization in charge is the Office of the Prime Minister. That's the coordinating body, but they've given different tracks to different organizations to lead. And we find that we are working with the Ministry of Agriculture on some food security aspects. In some aspects, we are working with the Ministry of Water and Energy. So we sort of get split. And having members also helps in the sense that some members can be part of one track, while the other members can be part of another track. But it is something that is everybody happy about. Everybody is interested, including us, and we are finding that we are having that space. We've got that space where we can actually input into the process.
Wow, Daisy, you have the most interesting background noise. So is there
it's not mine, I'm wondering. It's not my background, I'm also wondering.
Oh, okay.
I think
Untitled,
it's
can
good.
anyone
I
mute
think he
Judy?
managed to make his connection.
Can you mute?
Okay, so yes, if everybody could mute if they're not actually talking, I think that would be important, a bit of etiquette for the making Zoom calls work. Thank you. Yeah, I think they got it.
Jude has his hand up, just so you know.
Oh, great, Jude, you're reconnected. Wonderful.
Okay, thank you very much. I trying to emphasize on the activities we are trying to implement in Liberia presently. We have 3 priorities of activities to carry on or to kickstart. But after looking at the situation and the convert, we deem it necessary to start with agriculture according to our programs we have here. We have agriculture, we have woman empowerment income generating program, which is self-reliance program, and the education, which is the 3rd one. But after looking at it critically, we have seen that indeed agriculture is very important, and it is the backbone of any nation. And we looking at Liberia have been suffering from civil war, Ebola, and now COVID, which is not taking actually deep impact in Liberia, but it also part of the global crisis that affect every nation. So we deem it necessary, and we but they are not the best thing to do is to end up hunger by 0 level this before 2030, and we deem it necessary, to train
John, you're muted.
Yes, I was having sirens, not babies crying. But anyway, Jude, we've lost your sound again, but we do get the point. And so this kind of getting people organized is really what community-led development is about. I have a big poster in my dining room that says the only safe community is an organized community. And that's at the very heart of what we're doing here. And thanks, Daisy, for your comments about the work with the different ministries there. I did have one question, Daisy. Is there a specific event coming up? Is there a food systems dialogue coming up in Uganda that's on the calendar? Or is this just direct kind of person-to-person advocacy you're doing?
No, it is not that it's not person to person, but each track is supposed to eventually have its own like a calendar day, and we get one particular, maybe the issues which we are going to take to the main track. So then we'll have as Uganda as a country also what will be submitting to the main event. I'm not yet aware of the clear on the calendars for each of our tracks, and then how we'll have the final one. Maybe I'll let the group know when those dates come up.
That's wonderful, Daisy. Yeah, chasing after this summit with so many moving parts has proven to be a real challenge, because there's the action tracks, and there are leverages, and then there's advisory groups. It's quite a amazing process underway. Okay, so anybody else want to share elements of a strategy or a potential strategy that you're looking at in your country or in your community around the Food System Summit?
Okay,
Any-
may I just add one thing first also?
Yeah.
For our Right to Grow project, we are also doing consultations. Is it minor summits to generate views at district level? And that is happening within next week and within the next 2 weeks, to be able to input into the processes of the different tracks. So we have also as the Right to Grow, or the people working on the Right to Grow, who are also contributing to the process as well, from the local government or community perspectives.
Very good. Great, thank you. Other actions that we can take to advance this cause in our countries or globally?
I think Annette has her hand up.
Oh, good. Annette.
I do. You can hear me okay?
Yes, fine.
So I had been in some dialogues, I think last year, and have heard about these hermetically sealed grain bags for long-term storage. And so I'm wondering, how can those things reach local communities? Because right now they're in the hands of the scientists. And if they can, the FAO, if they can, get their funding directed to certain places, then the places get them, and aren't they lucky? But how can we make it so that more local communities get access? Or has anyone created something equivalent to it that can serve the same purpose? There are a lot of climate events like big floods that destroy crops. This is a really good way to, have that food security when cases like this come up, and droughts for that matter. So that's what I wanted to ask.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I know I was in Ghana when a lot of these wonderful waterproof storage bags were being introduced there. And you're right to mention FAO, because FAO, that's part of their job. They're supposed to be working with the agriculture ministries in each country to be sure that when there's relevant technology that people hear about it. But as mentioned, one of the huge barriers for small-scale farmers is the lack of sufficient farm extension. Having people who are plugged into the basic information. And one of the things that I know that we've been doing in Ghana is using cell phones to be able to reach small-scale farmers and directly engage with them on the challenges. I don't know if we have somebody from the Ghana chapter on right now or not. We did earlier, I know.
And of course, some communities don't have cell phones.
Right.
That's the reason.
Yep. Well, that is a big problem, and I think that is becoming less every day. I know we're there. Even Ghana, which is supposed to be the case study of wonderful connections, there's a lot of places in Ghana that have no cell phone signal. So being able to ensure that access to information as a human right is a strategy that I hope every chapter and community of practice dealing with farmers is really working on, because particularly with climate change, every farmer on earth is having to learn new seeds and new techniques and new adaptation to climate change. So, the access to information is just critical.
Right.
I did see it. Go ahead.
there
Yeah.
are intermediaries, who can take the information. For example, with FOPAC, they reach, I think, 80,000 small-scale farmers, and they are agriculture is their specialty. So they could easily take the information from a central source and get it out to the communities they serve. So I don't know if anyone's, considered that rather than going directly to the farmer.
Well, and I think that's, when we were talking about these food security committees and the training of like agricultural animators, farmers, farmer to farmer education that was key in India's progress back in the 60s, and it was key now. Okay, any other comments, questions, or contributions? If not, we'll move on to the next topic. Anyone? Yeah, please, Anne, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm representing the Benin chapter because I don't think Pascal is here, although Bérenger is here. So welcome, Bérenger, if you want to add. I just want to point out, back to Steve's point about practical ways forward. The Benin chapter identified 5 things to get through COVID very early on, and one of them was good nutrition, because that's important to a healthy immune system. And then they ended up parlaying that focus on nutrition into growing relationships with the World Food Program and the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Decentralization. So it goes back to that issue that Roland's raised about the need to contextualize the response so much by the conditions of the country that we're in. And Bérenger, I'm not sure if you want to add anything to that. You don't have to, but the chapter has been a real leader in food safety.
Bérenger, did you want to unmute and say anything?
Okay, hi everyone.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm happy to be here with you. I haven't more thing to say with you, but the regional director will say with you all about we do and food security. And after the training again, when he will connect it, he will talk about all things we do in Benin chapter. Thank you.
Thank you, Bérenger. Yes, unfortunately, Pascal couldn't be with us today, but he will definitely be with us in the future. Okay, anyone else? Anything else on this topic? If not, I'm going to go back to having slides.
John, I just wanted to actually make a request of chapter of all the movement members, not the chapter members, and that is that if, as you are participating in these dialogues, or if you are hosting events or coming across opportunities where you think that we should together as a movement be advocating for these, or for the community-led and food systems, then please do get in touch with us. The movement is about working collectively. So if you are hosting anything, let us know, and we would be very happy to work with you and work together.
Great, thanks, Gunjan. Okay, so let me talk about coming up next, because it's scheduled tentatively. We're pretty sure this is going to happen, and we'll be sending out our monthly newsletter tomorrow in any event, with a hopefully final date for the coming up COVID call. But the next COVID call, do you want to talk about the focus, Gunjan?
Yeah, so we had, in our March call, we had asked people what should we be focusing on in our COVID calls, monthly COVID calls going forward, because now we are looking in terms of the long-term adaptation. So far, a lot of what we focused on last year in our monthly COVID calls had been on immediate adaptations, immediate responses. What can we do for vaccines, accessibility, all of those issues. And while they still remain, what has become increasingly clear is that because of the long-term impact and how COVID has permanently changed our world and pushed us back on so many fronts, we need to think of long-term adaptation. And people had identified 3 areas, 4 areas to work on. So we took up mental health on our last call because that was the single biggest thing that people wanted to talk about. So we did that on our last call. And this call, we are going to focus on livelihoods and food security because that was the second thing that came up. The question that we are going to really be looking at is how do we as organizations, how do we pivot our work to address the new challenges that have come up with respect to unemployment and hunger because of the pandemic. We know that the number of people living in hunger and poverty has gone up. We know that unemployment rates have really gone up in the last year. And we've heard before from organizations that they've had to rethink some of the work that they are doing in view of these realities. So that's what we will be tackling in the next COVID call.
Great, thanks, Gunjan. And the other thing that is coming up is our next month's global call, which will focus on we're considering now. I'm hopefully going to finalize this soon, but a very different topic, which has become known as the Triple Nexus. And the Triple Nexus is the intersection of humanitarian response, peace building, and development. And really treating those as one issue and treating community leadership in those 3 issues as central. So this is another, the movement was started not just with development organizations, but also with peace building and humanitarian response organizations in the recognition that the same principles of community leadership apply in all those issues. And really they need to be treated not as a sequence of things, but as one strategy. So we'll have that as a special topic for our next call. And I think a lot of lessons have been learned from the COVID experience in all 3 of those dimensions of the Triple Nexus. The other thing that's coming up are lots of global advocacy moments. As mentioned earlier, the World Health Assembly is going on right now. A lot of things, excuse the noisy truck outside. A lot of topics of interest to the movement are coming up during the World Health Assembly. We'll be able to share some of the outcomes of that World Health Assembly at our next call. The United Nations High-Level Political Forum is happening in July. This is the annual event where the Sustainable Development Goals are reviewed. In this case, 44 countries are submitting their voluntary national reports on voluntary national reviews on how they're doing on the SDGs. And there's also space for civil society like us to participate. So we'll learn more about how we're going to be doing that on the weeks ahead, and we'll let everybody know, because your countries are probably participating in this big UN meeting that happens every July. The Food Systems Pre-Summit itself is happening at the end of July, and we're really targeting that with our advocacy, bringing the lessons that we've pulled together on community-led food systems into those government leaders who will be meeting in Rome. Presumably, they will produce a document to pass on to the September Food Systems Summit as the final outcomes. We will want community voices and our priorities expressed in that document. So we'll be reading it closely and then campaigning like crazy after that document comes out to be sure that the final outcomes of the Food Systems Summit reflect the true nature of of a world that honors, respects, and invests in community-led food systems. The climate change conference that was postponed from last year in Glasgow, Scotland, will be happening this year at the beginning of November. And so we're starting to build up more knowledge on and experience on the community-led approach to climate change adaptation and mitigation. Some of that actually came up during our food systems dialogue because the climate and food are so inextricably linked. And then, as mentioned earlier, the Nutrition for Growth Summit will be happening in Tokyo at the end of the year, and we'll want our voices heard there. So those are the global advocacy moments. I'm going to stop sharing the slides. Yes, please, go ahead.
Yeah, just a couple of more events that from the movement side, which we are participating in, which are happening. So, like I mentioned, that there are going to be trainings on the CLD assessment tool that will be organized in June. So, if you or your colleagues would be interested, please get in touch with us about that. We definitely know that the Benin chapter is planning to host a training, which is in French and English, a bilingual training. We don't have the dates yet. We know Zambia is happening from 2nd to 4th of June. We know Mexico is coming. In addition to that, the Climate-Based Adaptation 15 conference is happening in June. And we are doing trainings on not just the CLD assessment tool, but we are also doing a training session on our monitoring evaluation tool that we have developed for CLD programs. So we have 2 trainings, and then the Benin chapter of the movement is actually talking about one of their ideas on superfoods, on local superfoods, again, closely linked to the Food System Summit, but something that the Benin chapter has been wanting to focus on. So Pascal's not here, but he will be presenting at the event. They have a session. So if anybody is going to be at CBA 15, then please let us know and do attend the sessions that the movement is posting there. And finally, at the end of June, the Tamarack Institute is hosting a special session for the movement, again, on the research and the tool that we have done. And that's going to be on the 30th of June. So,
good. So, in case you, like me, fail to write all those things down that Gunjan was just sharing, we will be putting them in our newsletter, which will come out tomorrow, as along with links to the advocacy kit and everything that was discussed today. Any other announcements or any other business before we close the meeting?
I see there have been some interesting conversations going on in the chat, John, on actually the summit. So Samuel is back, and Consolata was sharing from Ghana, and Samuel has been sharing from Zambia, and Anne's been talking about the...
Okay, great. Anybody want to share any of that, or shall we just write it up and send it out to people? Okay, then. Well, if you want to unmute and say goodbye, we'll close this call. And as always, we'll have a recording of it for those who missed it or for you to be able to share it with your colleagues. Thank you all for joining and for all that you're doing to put people in charge of their own development and destiny. So talk to you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Take care.
Bye, everybody.